But because someone can say, yeah, it's, and she may not even have very strict circumstances that God has put in place. And I think maybe it's even like about living in want to also, um, so, it turns out that, I mean, we have studied this topic for so many years, you know, and or sometimes when we see that there are people that are unclear, about that, you could marry. I mean, I think this has happened in the past, where people have been, part of our class study for years, and then, or for at least once, when it comes to public religion, they have some sort of misunderstanding and very relaxed about the laws of religion, but they described, in much detail, I guess, what circumstances, it is allowed, and we talked about how the younger wife and the older one is almost always abused, and in countries where you only allowed to have one wife, it's definitely very wrong. So, um,
Oh, did I say the women? Yeah, I shouldn't have. Yeah, the work.
I think you accidentally said it.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I messed up there. Yeah, just the orphanage. The mothers, yeah.
Especially the mothers.
Right. Yeah, I think the YouTube trying to uh, fix it. There's no audio.
Is something wrong with the audio?
Yeah, I think I'll be able to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, like, you see people, in traditional Islam, they have, like, so many wives, And,
Yeah, that's like people, sometimes they have one wife, they like that too.
and it ends up, like, not even being a real marriage no more, like that's basically just lust, because you just want to be with more than one. Yeah, it's just sick. Yeah, right. It's like what people do here, when they're not married, they just go and sleep with random. But yeah, that's with a lot of women, but they just do it like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they're doing, but they're just saying like, oh no, I'm married, but that's like, no, like you're doing exactly that. Like they're tricking themselves, because they're like, oh, I'm following Quran, I'm right. That means I'm righteous. I'm not doing what they're doing. I'm following Quran and I'm doing it. They fall into Satan's trap. Okay, I think so. Circle, you said your sister wanted to join it. I approved her. Okay, are there any other comments from anyone about the verses we read? Yeah, Michelle. I just had I have a comment regarding the surah that we started. Surah woman. You know, like these are the type of things that we that the reason one of the reasons why God sends messengers. Because before this, like I mean, like you see how oppressive the traditional Muslims are towards women. And because of the messenger of the covenant, he made it very clear that this surah should be in defending the woman. In the favor of the woman. Yeah, right, mashallah. And you see, this is God's mercy, because if it wasn't, you just see like their point of view, and what they believe, like they're very oppressive in women, so it's like something, like um, not too big, but like straightforward, that the surah should be in favor of the woman. And subhanAllah, to me that's very important, because then you look at the surah in the light of that, Any interpretation should be in the favor of the woman. Yeah. MashaAllah. All right. Any other comments or questions from anyone? Anyone needs coffee? You made some, brother, and you don't want to drink it no more? Who, me? Wait, did you say anybody wants coffee? Yeah, I said, like, if anybody wants coffee, like, wants to wake up. Oh, okay. Feel free.
Sorry, brother, I'm at work, so I can't talk much. I'm so busy. Yeah.
Maybe Brother Jaffer wants some Turkish coffee.
Yeah, brother Jaffer never stops. He always has questions. MashaAllah.
Oh, he has a question? I was just listening. Salam alaikum, brother. Thanks, brother. Brother Jaffer, you have a question about how many women can marry? I don't know. He just listened. Yeah, I mean, John said about women, like, if, I think we've talked about it before, but it seems like, people in the U.S. right now, they're trying to go backwards with women's rights and oppression of women, and they're talking about restricting women in many different ways, their rights, and trying to limit them. There are a lot of Christian extremism on the rise, which is beginning to show like the ugly parts of Christianity, and how they always criticize Islam, for oppression of women, but you can see like the same kind of radicalism is present in Christianity as well, and you see these groups like now in 2025, bringing those things up, like it just feels like we're living in a different world,
Yeah, Yes, subhanAllah too. It's. I mean, like it's. I see it happening too. Like it's. People are gonna. It's getting exposed. You know. So like, there's not gonna be like after the great event, the smoke. People aren't gonna like. They're gonna be just so turned off at this point. God willing, for Christianity, they're gonna. It's gonna make them like nauseous or something.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna. It's not gonna like be a religion where people are gonna flock to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
mashallah. I mean, I see sometimes I come across, and some people are, bringing up really good questions, that align with the Quran, but they don't have those answers from the Bible. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have my mic on, by the way, for the YouTube audio, so my desktop is able to pick it up through the mic channel, just so if you're wondering.
So you can still turn that off, and you can just use your phone.
Well, that's what I meant. I'm using the phone to for y'all though, because for some reason when y'all speak, it's not picking up through my.
It's not picking up.
Yeah, so I'm basically
translating. Maybe I
translating.
can try it. I can fix it that way.
Okay, God, thank you. The experts let us know. Let's go.
Can I ask a question out of topic? Like off topic?
Yeah, sister, go ahead, because nobody has any questions right now. I think other person you had.
Okay. So brother, like, it is 8 right now, okay? So in here, they're like doing the idol worshiping and stuff. So if my neighbor, if they like sent me meat,
yeah, that's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah, because it's not dedicated to other than God. They only pronounce God's name on it when they sacrifice the animal. If they pronounce Muhammad's name or the saint's name or some idol's name, then it would be prohibited for us.
Yes, but what if I don't know what they say?
No, because that's their rules, If you know their rules, but I mean, also you're also only responsible for what you know, right? You're not responsible for what you don't know. But the thing is, on Eid, when these people sacrifice animals, there's a set way that they're supposed to do it according to them, So they don't pronounce Muhammad's name or anybody. They just say God's name.
Okay, mashallah.
Yeah.
I've been inside this idol worship and you know better than me, mashallah. It's just, like, even before submission, I was never really into these idol worships and stuff. Like, I was so far away from them, I never wanted it. But I was taught only about God, mashallah. And this is where God guided me.
And that worked before too, in the past.
I feel so lucky, mashallah.
Testing. Sorry, I'm trying to fix the audio. Yeah, I mean, so I think I had talked about it before, where I don't know why I can hear me. Okay, sorry. Now I can hear myself. Okay, this is okay. So I was just saying that in the we had talked about it before also. You know, like there are people that identify as submitters, and they believe that they're not supposed to um, eat the food, meat for the animals when they're sacrificed, because they think because they're not supposed to celebrate Eid, and they're doing it, so that makes the whole thing idol worship. But that's not the what the Quran says about your occasion. The Quran talks about the meat that is dedicated to other than God, and people don't understand what dedication is. And the messenger of the covenant talks about what it is like, when you kill an animal, you're sending it back to God. You're sacrificing the animal. You're sending the soul back to God. So you pronounce, if you, at that time you pronounce some name other than God, that's dedication to other than God, right? So this is also the same reason why it's not applicable to things like rice or vegetables or anything like that, because the rice, for example, doesn't have a soul, right? And yet you have a big majority of people who call themselves submitters too. I would say like maybe like probably like 80% of the people that we know, um, that are actually considering that also prohibited. Which again, we have to be very careful. Um, we cannot like attribute life to God. God says, stating this is lawful and this is unlawful. God says we're more evil than those who attribute life to God. So we have to be very careful about things like that.
Yeah, I think the audio is
now.
fixed now. Audio is fixed. All right. Anyone else has any comments? Any questions? Okay. So we read from Surah. Let's go back to read the verses. We read from Surah 3, verse 199, right? So let's take a moment, to look at the verses that were read and see if we have any questions or any comments. 199? So 3 verse 199 is on page 46. Right?
Yeah, I have
God
a
talks about the
question.
righteous Jews and Christians. Right? So yeah, we were just talking about it the other day, right? Righteous Jews and Christians. That I was saying that I I'm yet to meet in real life like any righteous Jews. I've met Christians I can say, righteous, but because God says majority of them are wicked. Um, and so you hardly ever come across people. But I mean, of course, I know some people on TV and stuff like you or internet, you come across, but just in real life, like I've just have never had any very good experiences. Um, and then I think verse 200 is also something that, you know, um, maybe it's a good to, reflect on it. God talks about the believers, they should be united. What? Oh, you're talking to someone at your work? Oh, okay. 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 No, we didn't hear you, Bert. Okay. So yeah, I mean, so because people talk about unity, and people say we should be united, right? But what does that entail? Like, does that mean it doesn't mean that let's say someone wants to add another practice into religion, or someone wants to attribute lives to God, and then you say no, God says we have to be united, so you believe that way and I believe this way, and we are both submitters, and let's just you know pretend that it, there's no disagreement, there's no issues, and we're all following God alone, and let's just be together. I mean, it means that we have to be united in worshiping God alone, you know, and not attributing lives to God, and sticking to the Quran alone. And by doing so, we should be united. In doing so, we should be united. We should not be disputing, in other words, with each other. We should not be divided, by, and how would you be doing that? You would be doing that by, you know, going away from the religion, adding things to the religion, adding laws to the religion. Hmm. 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 Yeah, mashallah. Hmm. Yeah, mashallah, you brought up the point about, God talking about the women and their rights in the Quran. So, I mean, I think the Messenger of the Covenant also talks about it. The Quran, favors the women in that sense. Like, people talk about feminism, right? And people look at it as a negative thing, right? But when you look at the Quran, I mean, Quran is all about women's rights, protection of the women, you know. And I remember we we had this one person who used to study with us for a while, and I think I mentioned him before, when I hinted at when I was talking about polygamy, and you know like he was always making jokes about against feminism. I was saying things about feminism that sounded so outlandish, and I thought like he was just joking, but eventually it turned out he was not joking, and he was actually against like women's rights and stuff. He was like, obviously he was Middle Eastern, he was like Lebanese, and then at the end, we it turned out that he was talking about polygamy, and he said, "Yeah," he says, "it says you can have more than one wife," and and the messenger talked about it. I mean, I can't even say some of the things that he had said, but he says now you can even have as many wives as you want, like. And I said, you mean like you can even have 1,000 wives? He said, yeah, you can even have 1,000 wives if you want. And he gave such a bad explanation. I mean, like, I just feel embarrassed to, just bring his justification into this. Like, it was so bad. But we can see, subhanAllah, like in the Quran, I mean, Quran was revealed 1400 years ago, while, I mean, all these people were so oppressed, and it talks about women's inheritance rights, inheritance, for them as spouses, inheritance for them, from their children, inheritance from their husbands. I mean, women are not given any rights in these societies, like even now, very little, right? And especially like among the Arabs. But Quran, brought those things to light for a lot of people, right? And still, people only look at the negative things that, Satan wants them to focus on, and they misinterpret the Quran and twist it to repel people, right? But we can see here the amazing, laws that God has put in place, because God doesn't want to victimize anybody. God is looking after both men and women. God says, as far as their faith is concerned, men and women are equal, right, to each other. I mean, of course, they have different qualities, but as far as their belief is concerned, they're equal. And mashallah, this is something that is, I'd say, like, worth mentioning and talking about. Mashallah, I mean, this is, by all, modern standards, I mean, gives women, equal rights, same as men for everything, right? I mean, like we were talking about, Christianity today and how it's going backwards. People are talking about, um, uh, uh, cutting, welfare for the women, if they decide to leave the husband. If the husband leaves them, then probably not. But if they decide to leave the husbands, then their benefits and the benefits for the children, to be able to eat food or to be able to see a doctor, all of those basic benefits that they need for their basic survival being cut off just so they could be forced to stay, in even, let's say, an abusive relationship, and making divorce, for example, prohibited, etc. So I mean, but God has, obviously God hates divorce, but there are circumstances when women have to protect themselves and they don't have to stay in an abusive relationship. But we're seeing that people are even like being have the audacity in today's society to even justify abuse, physical abuse against women, saying that, for example, if a woman, I mean, this is unbelievable. They're talking about, for example, they're saying like if a husband slaps a woman and a woman calls the police, that's very wrong for the woman to do. Like she should just, you know, accept it, right? I mean, this is so bad. Um, and saying that the violence against women is okay based based on their innovations, right? There's nothing to no, God would never advocate anything like that. God doesn't advocate. God says you should not abuse your wife. I mean, we have X, Y, and Z, right? So where is X, Y, and Z in this picture, right? When we're talking about women's rights.
Education for that, I mean, even like in normal situations, you can't transgress um, until somebody transgresses against you. So how hitting a woman, you know? I mean, and plus like, how can that be right? I mean, the Quran is totally against that. I don't know. Like, bring that's like stuff back, basically.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. And they're talking about like killing all the homosexuals and or and not the homosexuals, I mean the transsexuals. It's unbelievable. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and yeah, yeah, exactly. There's so many things, but yeah, I mean, mashallah, it's always, I mean, it's good to see that, like the Quran, is, there's no nonsense in the Quran, and if you look at these rights for women, and when people criticize the Quran, they don't talk about this. They don't talk about these verses. Okay, there's inheritance, yes. There's all these rights. They don't talk about this. They're like, oh, what the Quran says, women get half the share, or the Quran says, their testimony. They're looking at all the things to try to make it look like, Quran is, somehow against uh, women's rights, or oppressing them in some way. And obviously, but they are helped by these so-called Muslims who do interpret it that way, right? Hmm. 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 To see if they reach maturity, like, I mean, like talk to them, uh, you know. Hmm. Yeah, if they're mature, if you want to see if someone's mature or not, you have a conversation with them, you find out if they're immature, like if they're still, just like say, making jokes like the kids, and stuff like, for example, like they're not mature yet. Yeah. No, like I mean, like they're you can tell when someone's mature or not, right? When you talk to them, yeah. So you test them, you talk to them, you know, ask them about stuff like, you know, yeah, I mean, sometimes a person can be, you know, depending on the age, like, you know, God could have said, you know, they have a certain set age, like after this, you give it to them, you know. But God says, no, you should check to see if they reach maturity, you know, because they could be mature earlier, you know, and still be able to take care of their money. Like, you know, you have people, for example, who become financially responsible at a much younger age, right? And then you have other people that may never be financially responsible, you know. And but you know, you have people like, for example, you hear about people in college and stuff like who are investing their money into stocks and all that. You know? And then you have people who don't even know how to save money, you know. So things like that, I guess, you know, I mean, it really is up to the person, you know, to judge the individual. Yeah. Huh? Oh, you're investing? Most people aren't, yeah. College. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, I was just spending as I was getting whatever I was getting, I was spending. Don't feel bad. Yeah, but I think it does have to do with the financial, being financially responsible, you know, because, you know, they could just waste that money and then have nothing for, you know, their future, right? And it's the money that, you know, has been left by the parents, you know, so the children can be looked after. And if you just give it to them while they're not even mature, they're just gonna waste it, or someone's gonna take it from them, you know, and then of course, you know, that will not serve its purpose. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Not to mention what God talks about the traveling aliens and how to treat them, and you know, I mean, all that stuff. Obviously, they should be. God says, you know, the Christians, about the Christians, they have people among them, you know, which it's true right now. Like what's happening, you see some of them standing up and saying that we should. This is not what the Bible teaches, right? Hmm. Mhm. 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 Yeah, but God tells us, like you should help the traveling alien, right? Not make their life more miserable. We have to be charitable. We have to be kind. Have to have compassion. You know, that's what it teaches. But it's the same. Um, yeah, it's the same thing like we see happening in all satanic cults, right? How Islam is the satanic cult, and now we have see this other satanic cult. This is a satanic cult, but I mean, it's not a political. It's not so much of just like a political cult, right? It's like a religious cult also, right? Because all these people are doing it in the name of religion, right? They are doing it for Christianity and religion. So it's a religious cult also, right? Hmm. Yeah, it is a religious cult. When you think about it, and how this was, formed is through, all these small cults, you know, and corruption, and how all of these religious leaders were paid, you know, to bring people in, right, as recruiters, agents of Satan. Mm-hmm. 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 Sometimes big necklace. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyone else has any comments, any questions? Inshallah. All right, so I guess if there are no comments or questions, God willing, we can conclude our study. Thank you, Brother John, for leading the study, and thank you all for joining us. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.